Hi everyone. So welcome. This is your introduction course to qualitative methods. My name is Yana. I'm going to post slides for the lecture, of course, ahead of time, but I'm also going to do this little video here to ensure that if you do end up missing a class or a lecture or several lectures due to health reasons, driving conditions, whatever it might be, that you're not stuck and you're not behind on material. I'm going to do these videos on top of any slides that are very important to get you to understand the material better than just what's on a slide in the event that you're not there. So let's introduce myself. My name is Yana Berardini. I came to the Niagara region around like 2013 and I just fell in love with this place for some reason, I don't know. Stayed for my master's in child and youth studies, stayed for my PhD in child and youth studies, and then I went off to do a postdoc, which is a post fellowship with the Students' Commissions of Canada. And I work there. So I work in a fidelity role for research, meaning I make sure that research evaluation plans run smoothly and are appropriate for any projects that I oversee. And here I'm going to lecture you about the qualitative methods. I have history of teaching quantitative methods. So this one will be my qualitative methods. I've done my fair share in research, as you can tell, and I'm just looking forward to building your skills here in regards to the qualitative methodologies. So not only we will go through a lot of qualitative methodologies and you will read a lot of studies that did something different and conducted research in really cool ways, I will also get your wheels spinning, hopefully, on figuring out what the ethical concerns are with qualitative research methods, and also get you to understand how to analyze it in the event that you do end up staying like me for research long term. You get the skills necessary to know how to code information and how to present information. So I'm hoping through this qualitative course you will get all necessary tools to know how and whether or not you like research and how you interact with asking questions and actually evaluating it and so on. So yeah, I've had my fair share, like I said, in teaching quantitative methods. This is going to be my qualitative methods sharing of everything I've done. And you might be wondering why I'm speaking so low. It's because I have two kids up there sleeping up there. So yeah, it's gonna be a crazy ride, but I'm looking forward to meeting you in person and really getting you excited about things as much as I am. I know it's hard to believe it, but I really am. So looking forward to meeting you soon. Okay, so the main part I think that you're interested in is how you're going to be evaluated in this course. So if you open Sakai, you will find the course syllabus that explains everything and what we're going to do on a weekly basis. It also shows your TA's information, which means like the email contact that you would require to have in order to succeed in this course. You will have a seminar too, aside from the lecture, and this TA would be responsible for your markings and ensuring that your participation grade is there, and if you have any questions you ask your TA, so that email will be very handy to you. They're going to have office hours and so on. Now, it's not to say that I don't welcome questions and office hour visitations. Please come see me. I can't stress that enough. If you have any concerns in this course and you want to talk about something, I'm your first person that you can go to for sure. But aside that, the TA is there to make sure that you come to the seminar. Seminar participation will be marked out of 15%, which means that I've divided it into attendance and participation. Attending a seminar is very much mandatory. Participating in seminar is also mandatory, and it's accounting for 7.5% of your grade, meaning that every week that you will go to your seminar, there will be a discussion point about something that I want the class to discuss about. So if the week of ethics, I will give 3 topics to discuss. The seminar will then be divided into 3 groups. The 3 groups will kind of combine their brains to talk about something and brainstorm ideas, answer the question, and then there will be a share back time where you will be able to share what you found. So in this participation, it's not that you have to talk in order to get marked, but you're working in a group. The TA sees you commenting, participating, talking. You're not on your phone disengaged the whole time. And in that way, you will build your participation mark. If you are comfortable presenting what you shared back, that's great. If you need a little bit of time towards the end of the semester to get comfortable, that's also great. If you're not comfortable at all, come see me, come see the TA. Tell us why you can't not present, but basically share what you've done during the seminar, and we will see if there is any way to accommodate that. But it's basically very informal, fun, safe space for you to share what you've brainstormed throughout the 1 hour. Reflection 1 and 2 will be made out of 15% each. Reflections is based on the readings. I've planned this course from the beginning. I've talked to professors who've led this course before, and I am very much attached to the articles that I've chosen as part of the readings. I hope that they will resonate with some of you as you are moving into roles with, not only doing research with children and youth, but also working with children and youth. Some of you might be program leaders, some of you might be camp counselors, some of you might be food server in any restaurants, right? So the fact that we're going to always see families and children and youth is not that far-fetched. Some of you might want to be teachers. So really, these are articles that I've chosen that not only summarize the theme of the week, but also are very easy to understand. They are very interesting, subjectively speaking, but hopefully they arise a lot of responses and some kind of ways of thinking that you've not been used to before, and they're more than reflected. Like, you can reflect on these articles in several ways. The first reflection and the second reflection is based on just course readings, and it's more of a, how would I say that? It's less academic way of reflecting on a reading. I just want to know that you've done the readings and you can think for yourself. I am more than welcoming the use of I, like in a written conversation or written material, I would say. And I really like that informal aspect of writing, that you don't have to be super academic, but you have to be reflective about what you've just read and understanding it and tying it to certain things in the readings. So that is going to be the reflections. It's like a reading response, basically. The midterm will be out of 25%. It will be held in class on October 25th, I believe. And don't worry, you have it all in a syllabus later. The midterm is going to be multiple choice. I've also thought very long and hard about it. And instead of an open-ended essay-like responses, I would be more inclined and happy to do it closed and do it almost like application and definition. I think that qualitative research methods, a majority of it is actually, unfortunately, is understanding certain definitions. And I know that it can be dry, and I've done that before, but it's the foundation of doing the right kind of research. So what do we mean by ethics? What is qualitative versus quantitative? These are all things that I will teach you, and my lecture slides will have. They're not to trick you, they're not to make you sweat and study mindlessly, but they're there to support your growth in this in your degree. You have to understand that in order for us to move forward and actually do research, we have to know what research is, and some of the questions will be application based. So it will be like, for example, so and so are doing an interview with so and something's happening. What is the scenario called? If I reviewed it in the lecture and the material that you are asked to read is about that situation, phenomenon, experience, we will have it in the midterm. And usually I'm not there to trick you. I'll probably give you a glossary of items to study from. I will make sure that I emphasize what you should and should not pay attention to, because I don't want you to waste time on things that are not relevant. So don't worry, I will be there for you, and we will do a lot of like a little prep for it. And then the final assignment, instead of an exam, really an examination for me in this course is a bit pointless. Like, I do have to do a midterm, so meet me halfway. Examination is pointless in a way that I've already assessing what you're going to learn in this course through your seminar participation and your reflections. The midterm is there to assess your knowledge about like really key items, key issues, and so on. The final assignment is a composition of all from the beginning to an end, and you get to actually be creative about it. The syllabus is full of examples of how to do it, but you're in a driving role. You get to pick a topic. You get to review a little bit of the literature about it. You get to build the interview questions about it. You get to submit a proposal, and in that proposal it's going to be a section about methodology, a section about ethics, a section about everything we've studied about throughout the whole lectures. The whole course will be there in the final assignment. So I'm not worried about making an exam too. This is a way of really assessing your application of the tools you've learned to something that you might actually do in a couple of years. I know you're second year right now. Some of you might want to stay in research, and your fourth, fifth year will be somewhat of a thesis. This is in preparation to that. So I'm looking forward to doing that assignment with you, and I will be there again every step of the way supporting. The TAs will be supporting. There's going to be checkpoints in the middle to make sure you're on the right track. So please don't worry about the percentage amount. I'm more so there with you and making sure that all of this is going to be integrated in smoothly towards the end product. So yeah, hoping that's good. So here I want to really focus on what research is. So we all hear this word, research this, research that, this research study, this research that. What is research? What we mean by research is, in science, is a way to investigate something. It's an examination. It's an active investigation of a certain phenomenon. Whatever you choose, whatever your topic might be, there are ways that you can look at data that's already existing, for example, to find out more about it. Or you can actually create new information. So it's not just finding information about it, but it's also producing knowledge, meaning that you're doing something new, something that is often not there yet. You're filling in a gap that's previously is absent, and your new knowledge is a research. Basically, it shapes our beliefs. So for example, the pandemic happened, right? And all the research started assessing, what is this pandemic like? What is it impacting? And very quickly we found out that this pandemic, the closures haven't been really good for children. Why? Because it affected their well-being. Why? Because it affected their language development. As a researcher, you get to pick a niche, like a little small part of what you want to study, and you're going to assess it in certain ways that I will teach you how to do later. But it also, once you disseminate these results to the public and you publish them or you do a presentation about them, it shapes people's beliefs. And what we've seen is that it really does and can challenge policies or shape practices that, are there to hopefully better the lives of a lot of people. So for now, I know for a fact that if we found through research that closures or closing schools has not been beneficial to kids, now they're going to think twice before closing schools again, because it's going to challenge these policies that came about as a result of COVID and the practices we've done, and really shine a light on what we should and we shouldn't have done. So it really is cool in a way that it produces new knowledge, but it can also reflect cultural assumptions. So in the articles that you've read, um, there is a hidden assumption that us as a society, a Western society, believes children to be. And this conceptualization, we call it, of childhood really is going to drive research, and which is a point that I'm going to get to later. But it really is, it's how you make this research, how you test this research, how you investigate this phenomena has to do or reflect some cultural assumptions. So how we view children, for example, if we don't view them as competent beings, for example, then you're not going to study children and youth, you're going to study adults. And if you view a disability a certain way, your assumptions are going to come through, your biases, the ways that you've been raised. So the cultural assumptions, they do reflect a lot of cultural assumptions too, that we as qualitative researchers have to know how to partake and how to be aware of it and how to store it somewhere, write about it, which I will teach you later too. But it's this is what research is. Research is an active investigation of the world. It's searching for whatever relevant data already exists or producing new data through experiment or some other means. And usually it's been done systematically and objectively. But what I'm here to teach you is that it changed. There was a change from this objectivity to what we now know as qualitative research, is opening the door to more subjective experiences and ways of knowing. So this slide is also very important because it talks about the research process. Every research study, every research examination, investigation, whatever you want to call it, develops a plan. And your paper at the end will go through these little components. And what I mean by that is that we all develop a research question or a topic. As a researcher, you really want to research what you're passionate about. So for example, for me, it was always young carers. My master's and my PhD and a little bit of my postdoc were all related to a small population or a sample of children and youth that are called young caregivers, young cares. And these young children provide caregiving to family members, whatever the reason may be. It may be because the family needs help with translation, maybe they're newcomers to Canada. It may be that somebody in the family has a disability or an illness, so they're pitching in more, they're doing more responsibilities. It may be an injury, addiction, maybe a parental absence, one income family, and so on. And so my research was always like developing that research question around who these young caregivers are, what is their profile. That was my master's research. So what I've done is I moved to the next step, which was reviewing the literature. So reviewing the literature with everything I could find about young carers and what the profile is. When I ended up doing my PhD, I looked at self-compassion. So do these young children or young adults or young people, do they have the capability to self-care as much as they provide care to others? We always hear about how many hours they spend on caregiving for others, how much time it takes, how many disadvantages or advantages it might bring to the family. It can bring a family closer together, or it might affect their academics, right? But what you don't hear is that if they have time to provide care for the self. So right now, as my new role as a parent of two now, you don't have the time to self-care. You just don't. When you provide care to others, it's almost like you have to really try hard to provide care to yourself too. So I just wanted to see, do they or can they provide self-compassion when they need it the most? And is it something that's worth exploring? So my literature review took me on. Literature review means you're assessing what literature has been done before. What articles are there before you entering this field to tell you about who young carers are? Has there been any studies already done on self-compassion? What is self-compassion? Who are young carers? What do they do? What does it mean to be self-caring? All that stuff is a literature review. You're reviewing the literature, which means the articles, academic articles that has been already published, and you're reviewing it to see where you might be adding stuff, where you might be filling a gap, where you might be putting it all together. Your job is to create like a storyline from all existing literature and summarize it. And then you develop a hypothesis and a research design. So really, I'm here to with you to not only, you know, we're not so much going to be caring about hypothesis building because this is more quantitative process, but the research design for us will be very important. How are we going to study what we're setting to study? And before the research design, there's going to be a research paradigm with answering some ontological, epistemological, and methodological questions, and then you choose how you want to design your study. So this is all in the little slides to come. So I'm gonna pause a little bit and not say too much about it because we're gonna revisit it. And then we're going to obtain ethical approval. Every research study needs to be ethically approved if you're studying children and youth or human beings, parents, teachers. Anybody that's human or animal has to go through an ethical review process. And we have a research ethics boards, and it's going to be lecture 2. We're going to learn about ethics. And really, you're setting up a study in a way that will mitigate all risks, will benefit some people, and you've established a need for the study. And it goes through an ethical approval. Once you approve, you go to collect the data, you analyze the data. We're going to be not collecting data, of course, but we're going to be studying about different methods of data collections through interviews, focus groups, observational study, ethnography, through arts, through already made available data like records and things like that, through participatory action research, and through mixed methods too, which means you combine qualitative with quantitative. And then we're going to show you how to analyze qualitative data. So I'm going to do a really fun, probably in class activity or maybe in your seminar about how to analyze this data. We're going to code it and we're going to interpret the findings. So this is where all the data comes together. You get to write it up. You get to draw conclusions about the study. So in my self-compassion study, I had a set of 3 for my dissertation, for my PhD. And it was like the first study, what variables were predicting self-compassion in youth. Very much quantitative, very much numbers, very much this is a survey, do the survey, I will analyze it. The second study actually looked through focus groups at young carers that would basically I would ask them through interview and focus groups to explain how they provide care to themselves. What is the what do they do around the house to provide care to others? Do they have time to provide care to the self? How do they do it? And so on. So that was really cool focus groups with 2 young carers split into 2 age groups. So I did 4 focus groups, and that was my second study. And my third study looked at comparing young carers to non-young carers on self-compassion and subjective well-being. So again, very much quantitative. And that was my research design. It was quantitative and then mixed method and then qualitative. So it was very, come over. I'm like a broad mixed method kind of researcher, but it's very fun once you design it to see the results. You saw that young carers basically can't provide self-care, and if they do, it's very like, oh, I'm listening to music, oh, I watch TV, oh, I do something else, but it's not very full to the extension that it can help them cope with certain life situations and stuff. So it was really fun. It was really good. And I'm hoping through the final stage of this course, you will have the capability to carry out a research process and a project. So here is just to, you know, reiterate that research is very much active. It's step by step and it's a systematic process. You go through different steps one by one in order for the process of research to have an end result. But it can also be creative, and we're gonna have a very cool, I think it was like mid mid semester, where I've introduced some art form research. And you will get to know that research is not just here's a survey, do it. Oh, I need to conduct an interview with someone. You can do really creative things with research and take it a step further. You can get young people to participate in your research. You can give them cameras. It could be diaries. It could be drawings. It could be a lot of cool stuff that can make it very creative, but you also have to remember they can be very impactful, which means, like I've said before, it shapes policies. It can challenge policies and practices. It can make big changes. A lot of research for bullying, for example, works on an intervention level to show teachers and students and parents and principals what to do in an event of bullying. And it's not just the zero, what do you call them, policies of no bullying, but it's more than that. It's interventions that target certain aspects of bullying that might actually be counterproductive and teach people how to bully more, for example. So they work at very cool aspects of an intervention, and they are impactful, which means that if they find that they're not working or they are doing something wrong, then they change, and then they go after a personality trait like being altruistic, teaching altruism, for example. And then you put it into schools and you implement it, and it becomes very effective, and there's going to be lower rates of bullying, for example. It might also be impactful to have a case study, for example, or several case studies that are not necessarily large case study, like large numbers, but it might be that you researched one case study about a really particular aspect, and that all that is needed to be impactful, and then it's going to be on the news, and then it's going to be through presentations. Like, research can do a lot of stuff. So in my work right now, we are doing program evaluations for a lot of subscribers, we call them. So they come into Students Commissions of Canada, and they have trouble engaging youth in their program. So we come in and not only help them to increase that youth engagement, but also study the effects of the program. So do they feel safe? Are their voices heard? Do they have adult and child partnership, And through these things, they're very impactful, because the Students Commissions of Canada, if you even look it up, it's a very good organization that has a lot of momentum now with UNICEF and the governments that fund it. And when you show impact, when you show your program is working and what the effect it can have on people, you get to be very strong, I think, in the research you conduct and in the programs that you oversee. And there is some aspect of credibility that you gain. So research really can be a part of, you can do anything with research. You can study anyone you really want to with research, as long as it goes under ethics approval. But the main issue here, and why we're in child and youth studies, is that research on children and youth. It used to be very much a research on children and youth, and it now changed to being a research with children and youth. So what do we mean by that? Before, in the past, it used to be that children were seen as objects of research. You just kind of research them, you do a little survey with them, you there is an interaction in form of an interview with them, and then they're done. Now there is a capability of looking at children and youth and saying, how can I make your voice heard? How can I make your voice amplified? How can I give you a participatory role in research? And some of them become a participating like agency buddies, which means that they have their capability of doing whatever they want to research and direct it from the beginning to end. And really, in that way, it amplifies their voice, and it also can be shaped drastically by how society conceptualizing childhood. So in the past, again, the second article that I gave you is describing a society, a Western society, where we did not really look at children as capable beings. They are not ready yet. They are not made yet as an adult. They are less than an adult. They're like miniature adults, right? And that really shaped how research was done with them. And that's why children were kind of like object and not even a part of research. Research was done on them. Like if you look back at, some of the experiments that were done in the past, and some roles of great philosophers and psychologists like Piaget, who were studying their cognitive development, it was done on them. They were experimented on, and then a universal steps of cognitive development were created because of that. And it wasn't until sometime later, centuries later, that it changed, and it became that we really conceptualize childhood differently now. So how do we conceptualize childhood? There is a spectrum of child participation. Children are given now more respect, way more protection, and we are looking at them as active agents in their life. They are the narrators of their life. Nobody will know what they're going through unless you're a child yourself. And it's very humbling in a way to know that research changed that much. Like you've read, it went from they're just objects. They probably don't know their stories. They probably have active imagination, so how credible they can be for my research, versus looking at them drastically different and saying, wow, how can I improve your life? But not only improve it, how can I amplify your voice? And how can you tell me, how can we be on the same level? You can tell me things that I can then help you with. What do you need? So in our research with young people, we always ask them, like, what kind of compensation you want? What kind of needs are we not addressing that you would like to make? Where do you see these results presented? How can you shape these results? We're always amplifying their voices, and there's a spectrum to it. So you can do it as they're just participants in a research, and you just finish the research and then they're done. Or you can have them as little helpers, so they can help you with research and maybe be a little bit play more an active role in research, or they can fully be a participating body in research. They will drive the direction of the research. They will have all their stories told from their perspective, and they will experience things that you don't hypothesize about. You have nothing, you're just giving them the role of being active participants in research. And we're going to study about it later, so don't worry about that. But I just want you to know that there is a spectrum to that. And if you read the second reading, you will see two examples also that talked about how we can make them as participants, more than just objects of research. And you really have to kind of get understanding or reflection, reflecting on the fact that if we think that children are not capable, what happens then to research? And you kind of got to know about it from the second reading in respect to the fact that children were not believed that they were capable. Children were not believed that they are able to tell stories that make sense. Children were not really trusted before, I guess. And now it's completely different. So research really took a turn, not only from a very objective reality, like there's one truth and this is it, and this is what happened to these children, it must be universal, blah blah blah, to now more subjective. How are their experience are shaped by other factors? How can we then work with them to create better lives for them? Things like that. So it's working with them, research with them rather than on them. That's the main kind of lesson here. And like any one who would ask, okay, what's next? How do you do this research? You would have to know that there's two mindsets. There are very much two mindsets. I, for some reason, operate with both, but not many people do. So if you kind of look at it from how the articles kind of showed you, there's two sides. There's quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative is very much into numbers. So if you take my daughter's first day of kindergarten, which was 3 days ago, well, I don't know when I'm gonna post it, but last week, she went to the first day of kindergarten as a quantitative research. My one mindset would be all about counting the days before, counting how I can how I can predict her success by doing certain behaviors and really make this transition to school better. This is quantitative research methods in my brain. Qualitative research methods in my brain is more about noting the experience that she feels, the feelings that she felt, observing her reaction the first day she's there. If she's happy, asking her what makes you happy. If she's scared, saying things like, it's okay to be scared, tell me more about it. That is more of the qualitative research mindset. And objectively, this is quantitative. Subjectively speaking, it's qualitative. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that. So quantitative methods here are seen as objective inquiry. So you're scientifically approaching a problem, you're scientifically studying something, which means objective truth. It uses numbers, it's objective because it doesn't get feelings, imaginations, experiences into account, it's only numbers. It ensures replication, generalizability, and robust ways of testing, which means replication, you can replicate. If I've done a survey on self-compassion on youngers, and these youngers answered a certain way, I can then replicate it with another group of youngers. And I can also generalize to the fact that I can say, okay, this is generalizable to all youngers in Southern Ontario, for example, which research likes to do. And it's robust ways of testing. You have surveys, the surveys have been validated before, they are reliable. You do the survey and you get results. There is not much to them, you just compile numbers for averages, and that's what you have, an objective truth. You test cause and effects, or you can test relationship between variables. So cause and effects, for example, would be a study that's longitudinal. So cause pandemic, affect language development. You want to know how the pandemic caused language delays in children, for example, because of being masked all the time. Relationship between variables are also tested. You're testing whether or not, for example, one variable is related to another. You're testing whether, in my case, self-compassion was related to happiness in youngers, for example, or well-being. You're hypothesizing behind it too. Hypothesis is a set of expectations that are carried out ahead of time. So you're hypothesizing, you're saying, I'm expecting that self-compassion will increase youngers' happiness. This is my expectation, it's my hypothesis. But it starts with theory. You need the theory. And my theory was that, listen, self-compassion is very good to mental health. If you have self-compassion, you're more likely to be happy, blah, 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 blah. Youngers might have lower self-compassion because they spend so much hours of care for other people. Do they have self-compassion for themselves? My theory is that if they do, then they will be happy. my theory that if they're not, then clearly their self-compassion is a bit low. So that was my hypothesis. And then you test it. You give them a survey, you test the results. But your aim is not to generate their life experiences, it's to generate a large-scale numerical data to predict and generalize these results to other sections of the world. So if I find that young carers have low self-compassion, well, maybe it's generalizable just to this southern Ontario, but really if someone else replicates it in BC, now you got another study there. And if someone else replicates it in USA, then well, it means all young carers have that. So it really is about how generalizable your results are, how you can generalize to other young carers, and how it's numerical, like you are just predicting a fact, basically. You're testing a theory, and then it becomes factual. Qualitative, on the other side, is a subjective inquiry. So subjectively speaking, we do care about people's behaviors, people's nonverbal communication, people cues, people reactions, experiences, life, attitudes, whatever it is, we care for that. That's subjective inquiry. It's conducted with smaller numbers because here you don't care about how many participants you have to do these crazy statistical analyses. You can have one case study, and that's a good qualitative method. You can also have an interview with 5 people, and that is a good study. So you're conducting this study with way smaller numbers, and you don't care about how generalizable your results are. You don't care that it's not about where these results get to be replicated and how generalizable your results are. It's about how meaningful these results are with what these people told you about, and their experience matters, and we're going to publish these experiences and hope that it brings depth to the situations, not breadth, not the fact that it's going to be replicated and all over the place, but it's the depth, it's the quality of the relationship or experience that you have in your hands, what you found. And it starts with open questions like, what are you worried about from doing this course? How are you going to use qualitative methods in your future? Why are you in this course? When was the last time you thought that research was a cool thing? That is kind of what qualitative research is. The aim here is not to have these replicable objective inquiry, is to explore individual experiences, beliefs, attitudes, perceptions, how they like. If they don't communicate something on an interview, well, why not? There is things that are happening with even your body language that will explain more and have more depth to it. If you're in a situation of an interview and somebody's crossing their hands and not talking, right? That tells a story too. And that's what researchers study when they do qualitative methods. So really the difference is that it asks different questions and it cares for different things. Quantitative research asks about measurable outcomes. My self-compassion example with young carers. Self-compassion was a measurable outcome. I had to make sure that the survey that I used was validated for young people that age. I had to make sure that all the items on the survey were very good, like in good language to understand, and it was a measurable outcome. It is an outcome that I could then make into mean with a standard deviation. I can look at the average and the range of scores and so on. It cares for the outcomes. It really does. When I talked about the strength of the association between two variables, the relationship between two variables or cause and effect, it cares about the strength of it. So how strong is the association between the two? So my example is, and I do it in my quantitative courses too, there has been a theory, an assumption, I don't know what it was, that if you drive a red car, you're more likely to get pulled over. So the relationship here in a quantitative study is driving a red car and getting stopped by a policeman, pulled over. So the outcome is how many times you've been pulled over driving that red car. The analyses of language skills before and after the pandemic to assess the effects of the pandemic on children's language development, which is another example I kind of talked about it before. So your language skills is the outcome. You very much want to know what happened before the pandemic and after the pandemic with regards to this language skill development. It's the outcome based research. Qualitative research is about a process. It asks different questions. Remember, it starts with the why, for whom, where, how, why, right? What. And it cares for the process. It creates meanings and understandings from the process, from what you've said, from your words, interviews. So in my study, the example with the picture with the red car, it's basically a study of maybe I'm going to interview policemen and ask, well, why is it that you're more likely to stop red cars? Or what kind of behaviors or tendencies do you get to see in drivers that make you stop them? I can ask children in my other example about language development, ask them about their experiences staying at home, seeing people with the masks, what it did to their language development. I can then assess their language development through diaries. I can have them write something and see whether or not, some stuff are going to be coming from their diaries that I didn't pay attention to, and grammatical errors are all going to be the same. I don't know. But that's just a qualitative investigation of the phenomenon. So the advantages to qualitative methods is that it's theory development. You can develop new theories using this kind of methods. You get rich descriptions and like, remember, it's about words, it's not about numbers. So you create a shared experience with the reader. You're seeing a world from the eyes of the participant. It gives you a chance to kind of learn from that participant. You have a meaning making, like you're exploring a meaning from a bunch of surveys or focus groups, and the codes that you're then going to get through the data, the repeating data, which I will teach you later about. It's going to establish some sort of meaning, some sort of things will come out of these results, and you're going to be like, like that's why they're all said that. They're all experiencing this. This might be a theme. It eliminates the distance of numbers. So, when I say the average of self-compassion is 3 out of 5, well, what does that mean? But if you really talk to young kids about their self-compassion, and you get to know that, they're very judgmental about themselves as caregivers. So that's not self-kindness, for example. They're very mindful, but they have hard time to be mindful and understand what it does to them, right? They are more likely to be isolated versus the common humanity aspect of self-compassion. Don't worry about these things, but it gets more to the nature of what self-compassion is, and it's not anymore distant like a number. Their average is 3.5. No, you get to really sense what it's like to have a low or high self-compassion. Their experiences matter, and they become more embedded in you. The unique populations and contexts that you get to explore with qualitative research are crazy. We're going to explore some ethnographic research. We're going to explore some research that's done in classrooms, graffiti. We're going to explore research that was done on kids' preschools. It's very cool. Like, it makes you go, like I've had colleagues of mine and friends of mine that are doing qualitative research that went to Brazil to do research, like really cool contexts for this kind of methodology. You have to understand that there's multiple realities. It's not about that one truth, one logic, one assumption. It's about multiple realities. We all experience things differently. We have the capacity to feel things differently. One story is not often enough to really, be the end of the ends. It's not our kind of even emphasis. Like, there's multiple realities. Whatever happens to me might not happen to you, but if it happened to you, we're all living in, oh, that's a good example, the COVID pandemic. There's multiple realities to how COVID pandemic shaped people and how it impacted people. That's what it is. It's not that it hindered everybody the same way. It's not that it positively impacted some aspect of the life to the same degree. There's multiple realities that existing, and that's okay. And there's a holistic emphasis. You're studying the person, the group, the culture, the family in a natural setting sometimes. So we're going to explore it more when we're going to talk about ethnography. But there's also disadvantages to qualitative research methods. You really lack that objectivity, so you have to assess for credibility in different ways. We will have our final lecture of this course about that. Generalizability, you don't really have to care for, but it's not to say that it's not a disadvantage to it. The one advantage to quantitative methods is that you can generalize and you can make predictions about what's going to happen in other contexts. Here, you don't have that capability. Non-systematic, which means that it's not systematic. It's not that step by step. There's a lot of reflective things that happen in qualitative research methods, and a lot of biases that you as a researcher have to stop from impacting the data and so on. Very time consuming. Interviews, focus groups, scheduling it with participants. Ethnographies is like you engage in the community with them. It's very time consuming, and it's also very challenging. It's very challenging because you get to know people, and when you get to know people, you get attached to people. And so how do you leave then? We're going to talk about all these things in this course too, but how do you leave a scenario where you really truly got attached to somebody? How do you unhear some of the things that you hear in interviews? Those are very real life situations. So it is very challenging in some aspect, more than doing a survey that's more detached from you and you just get like a score. This is like you get to know people. So it's very challenging sometimes in terms of like you're coming home with it, and the stories that I've told are staying with you. So it's very important to keep in mind too. So by now, you're probably like, haha, that's why she's going to do multiple choice tests. It's because it's a lot of definitions, quantitative research, qualitative research, advantages to qualitative, disadvantages to qualitative, objective versus subjective. Like you get to know that these things are fundamental to understanding qualitative research methods, And one of the harder aspects of this course is this section right here. It's called a research paradigm. And what a research paradigm is basically an overarching view of a social reality of how we see the world operating. It's a paradigm in a way that it's a set of beliefs about something. So in your first reading, there was a lot about research paradigms, and the next things are ontology, methodology, and epistemology, and we're going to go through all of them and kind of figure out what are the roles in our research as researchers, what can we do with them, what are they, and what are the different paradigms that they operate from, what is the set of beliefs that they emphasize. I guess that's a good word. And we're going to go through one by one, and this one is not done often. It's not very much something that a lot of researchers do use in publications, but it's there to question your reality. So I want to do that with you too. So ontology is your ontological stance on what reality is. It's your own beliefs and assumptions, your ideas and views about the social world and how we go about studying it. So what is the nature of reality? Meaning what is reality and what can be known about it. So there's three common ones. Realism says okay, there's only one type of reality. It's the objective reality. I don't care about anything else. Reality is objective. One, objective versus subjective. Critical realism says, okay, yes, it is in fact objective, but certain factors can in fact influence it. And because they can influence it, we need to establish ways to set these biases out and control it. We have to be careful because not always it's very objective. And relativism says, okay, no, reality is very relative, hence relativism, and it's very much not objective, it's subjective. So I have a table 2 slides down that has all of it together so we can look at it that way too. And what epistemology did, epistemology is a stance that looks a little bit farther and says, okay, ontology was about what the reality is and what can be known about it. Epistemology is your ideas and theories about knowledge and the ideas about the nature of evidence. So it asks how we can claim to know something. How do you know that you know something? How do you know? How do you know that you know? So ontology is about reality and what is like. Reality is objective, reality is subjective, reality is like objective with a certain factors influencing it. Epistemology is like, how do you know that? How do you know that? So tell me one thing, how you claim to know something like that. So it's the ideas and theories about what you know and the ideas about the nature of what you know. There's 3 common ones. There is positivism, post-positivism, and social constructionist. So positivism is very much like that one aspect of like reality is objective. You're very much detached from the research. It's usually quantitative. You're very much believing that reality has to be objective. All knowledge has to be gathered objectively. Everything you know, well, how you know you claim something? It's fact. We've tested it. Post-positivism says, well, yes, it's very good to have all these things in place, but certain aspects are still influencing it, and that bias must be controlled. Age, gender, how you feel. Like, look at the midterm aspects, right? As a positivism, I can say things like, the reality is the average is pretty low. It's low, students are not doing well. It's one fact. I've tested it. This is the midterm. I've tested it through. Done. Post-positivism says, well, yes, but the temperature might have been really bad in this room. Maybe some people are not into quantitative methods more. Maybe they didn't understand the multiple choice. Maybe they don't like multiple choice. Maybe it was a winter storm and coming to campus was very difficult. All these factors, with addition to ethnicity, age, sex, your mood during that day, might affected that result. So really that's post-positivism viewpoint. And social constructionists say no. We don't agree. Reality is very much a subjective point of view. It is constructed, so kind of like what we're saying with the childhood constructed reality. It is created together and we're experiencing all together, more very much qualitative, and that's social constructionism, and it's very much critical assessment of what's happening. And I'm gonna show you one more and then the table. So to recap, ontology was about what reality is, what can be known about it. Epistemology was, okay, what is knowledge then? How do you know what you know? How do you know it? That's what it's like, viewpoints, like major theories that overarching, I wouldn't say major theories, I would say philosophical stance on that area of knowledge, philosophical. And methodology is that stance of saying, okay, we have the ontology and epistemology, but methodology is how you're going to assess it. It's the tools of knowing. It's the examination of the methods. So what it asks about assumptions, theory, and logic that's behind the methods. So what is it? So if you used X tools, how are you going to use them? That's methodology, basically. It's the design process. It's very important to every research study because methodology is key aspect in everything. It's basically saying, what is the design process behind showing me what you know and your reality stance? What tools can you use to get there? It's like a plan of action, basically. And the methods is the kind of procedures, tools that you use, but it's going to be heavily impacted by your ontological and epistemological stance. So if I'm a realist and I'm like very much objective and like quantitative researcher, my methods that I will choose and my methodology will be very much quantitatively in line with this thinking. If I'm post-positivism or even social constructionism, I will assess it using other methods and other tools that will help me understand what I'm seeking to understand. So if it was a study of self-compassion, it wouldn't be a survey. If I'm a social constructionism, it would be maybe like a diary of them, or like a really cool innovative tool, maybe even an interview that will allow me to embed myself in their experiences, learn from their experiences, teach. We're going to co-create this meaning of self-compassion together. That's what it is. So here I just took a little quote from an article. That's the first one. And I really like it because it says the usefulness of the chosen method will be dependent on the congruence with associated ontology, epistemology, and methodology, which means that you have to have all of them aligned. Congruence is like the alignment of all of them. And that's how useful the method will be. So in that sense, the next slide will be very much useful to put it all together because it's in a table. So with this table, I put it all together. Do note there is a little link under it. So click that. It's going to tell you about these important definitions too. But this is a representation of what I see as very helpful to understand every definition in every cell of these philosophical umbrellas. So if you're a positivism, if you have that tendency to really understand the world as objective and number oriented, your ontology is that reality is objective. There is only one reality, it's one truth. Reality is outside of the individual's interpretation or imagination. So nothing about feelings, experiences, anything we might represent a qualitative sense, nothing is there. Everything is like super quantitative. Epistemological view also is that, well, how do you know what you know? Is that knowledge comes from objective measures, facts, claims that are being tested, replicated, generalized, things like that. So of course the tools that you will use in the methodology is generally quantitative, and it's usually objective, and it's very much deductive. Deductive here means that it's very much not co-created, the opposite of co-creation. Deductive means you have set of principles and you came to these principles from let's say an experiment, and it's very much deductive. It was already there in the experiments and you just kind of summarized it. It's deductive. Methods is very much experiments, surveys, anything that will give you numbers, objective truth, objective claims, one reality mode. Then you have the social constructionism and the interpretivism that is kind of like the same, and they say no, like there's not one objective truth. Everything is subjective, everything is co-created, everything we know is socially constructed in a society that is has a political and historical and social context. You don't live alone, you are embedded in contextual factors. You yourself is embedded in family, you yourself embedded in a community, you yourself embedded in a government, you yourself embedded in what's beyond government, a country, you yourself embedded in politics, you yourself, like there is a neighborhood to you. So there is a history, like with a pandemic, right? There is a social aspect of it. It's very much where you stand and how you, it's like you co-create this meaning together, and we learn about the world through being immersed with it. You're not detached from it like a person who does a survey and like that's it. You're generally qualitative here. You're using inductive measures. You create these meanings. Remember, qualitative methods is all about creating theories, creating meanings, co-creating aspects. It's multiple realities that are running through, not just one. Usually through interviews, focus groups, and ethnographies, you will get these kinds of philosophical stance going. And then you have the post-positivism, where ontology about what is reality is all about, it's in essence agrees with the objective, but it says no, but we do have unintentional factors that can confound these objective truths. It's not always the same way. Something can influence it. And so how do you know where the knowledge comes from? Knowledge is imperfect, but we can limit the imperfections. We can control for it. You can kind of put it aside in statistical terms and see what the results are without it. Versus like in reality, can you, if you are going to, do a midterm, for example, and you're not going to do that well, for example, God forbid, I hope all of you will do well, but it's not that it's just the midterm. It can be the temperature of the room. It can be hunger levels. It can be sleeping hours. It can be time of the day. It can be all sorts of things that contributed to this evaluation. So really, you have to think in terms of like the philosophical stance. As a researcher, you're going to try to eliminate that. You're going to try to make it as objective as possible and make sure that all the other confounding factors can be controlled. And it's usually quantitative, sometimes qualitative, and the methods can be different ones here. So really, it's very important for you to know that there is a philosophical umbrellas that are operating at every level, and they shape researchers. They shape how we view certain populations. They shape how we choose methods. They shape what our results might be. And they also shape, in essence, your ontological and epistemological and methodological view. So remember, the methods you choose come from the ontological and epistemological notions that you have as a person, but behind you as a person, there's a philosophy about it. And these philosophical stands, I think, in my opinion, are important to note. They're not important always to think about, but they're important to know about. So in qualitative research, there are broad predispositions. Like these philosophical things are very much ingrained in qualitative research. One of them is truth is relative. How do you know that people were telling you the truth? Truth is relative. You can kind of assess it, but it's not an objective truth. Multiple realities exist, not just one. You can have two conflicting versions of the same event. You can have, people who will tell you that the pandemic was very, very, very good for them. And then people who will say that the pandemic was negatively affecting every aspect of their life. Well, what is the truth then? There's multiple truths, and we'll welcome multiple truths. And views are not static, which means that they change and adapt all the time. It doesn't have to be, it's based on like the context too, and the time of the day, and your views can change with the location, the time, and all that stuff. So it's really, that's why I think qualitative research sometimes gets a bad rap. A lot of people think that if you do qualitative research, you might have a lot of biases, you might have a lot of things that can go wrong. This is all true, but we have as researchers ways that we can make sure that we still have a very strong study. And I'm going to teach you that. I think the last lecture will be about it. But that's later, so you don't have to worry about it. But just remember that these are the broad propositions in qualitative research. The fact that truth is not objective, it's relative. The fact that multiple realities exist at one and we welcome it. And the fact that views are not static, they are changing all the time. So, what must we do? That's a really good question. First, like I said before, we have to know our own biases. You have to question your truth, and you have to question how you view certain cultures, populations, what you're willing to work with, what not, any ethical concerns, which we will establish in the next lecture, and things like that. You have to also pay attention to the social or political context, especially in research with children and youth. We all come from a political context. We all have our assumptions and beliefs. We have to then know that there is some kind of power relationship there. So political context, like I pulled from the second reading, I think. Political context, that is a network of power relationships that a child or a young person is already a part of before any research begins. You have to really pay attention to it. So why is it important? It's important for a variety of reasons. One, we will always have children and youth who would want to participate, but then they can't because of their political context. Maybe it's unsafe for them. Maybe there's something there in the community that will not let them because they're not safe. Two, they have more, before you even get to talk to them, there's stakeholders in place and they're going to say yes or no to their participation. So navigating the people who are gatekeepers is very important. Again, things that we will establish in the next lecture. So for you as a researcher, you have to think about all the social context, and especially even social, in terms of studying children and youth in the pandemic, right? They're now they're now home with their family members, and whatever they're going to say, what if that does something risky to them later on, whatever they're going to share with you in research. So it's very important for you to pay attention to the social and political context of any group that you are a part of, and acknowledge your ontological and epistemological assumptions right there and then. Acknowledge the fact that if you are more leaning towards the objective reality, then you're more likely to have a method that's chosen that's more in a quantitative sphere versus somebody who's like, hey, like we have these factors associated and embedded with us and we co-create meaning together. That's more qualitative stance. So we really have to know where we fit in order to do research right and pick the right tools to do research with children and youth. Hi, okay, so I stopped the last video as it was getting a bit late. I'm gonna do that again. Sorry again for being so quiet. My kids are sleeping. That's the pandemic life. So I'm just gonna do it, kind of continue what we were talking about. So in the last slide, it was talking about the fact that we have these predispositions or philosophical stances that are very important to any researchers. So we have the ontological, epistemological, and methodological assumptions or philosophical stance, like I call them, and they're very important. The researchers should know about them and where you're standing, whether it's more related to the quantitative sphere or the qualitative sphere, and so on. Now, it is believed that it's the research responsibility to make their positions explicit and articulate their views from the get-go. And on top of this, in qualitative research, there might be a lot of papers that are published with this debate in mind. What is ontological perspectives? What are epistemological perspectives? What do researchers have undergone, and what factors shape the research in a certain context that they're a part of? And we really are encouraging researchers to work with subjectivity, knowing which factors have influenced some aspects of their work. They can be explicitly stated and they can be celebrated in a way. So how we do it through two things: positionality and reflexivity, and they're very much connected. So positionality is the researcher's position of the worldview, whatever they believe in, really. the position you take in order to do the research. And that is basically your ontological and epistemological stance. And as a researcher, you have to know it and understand how all these aspects around you, your age, your gender, your sexuality, your historical and geographical location, your ethnicity, your race, how you were raised, all are shaped by. So it's shaped by all these factors. How you approach children and youth, it's shaped by these factors. So the second article is really much talking about it. And so in a way, that is your position in the research. So positionality is your position. Reflexivity informs positionality. So how does it do it? It actually makes you become aware of it and allows you to write about it. So that's the next slide. So reflexivity, like I said, is a part of positionality, and it's basically you're becoming aware and also examining how certain factors can shape your research. It can shape your research design, it can shape the methods you choose, it can shape a lot of things about the research, including the results and how you interpret them. So you have to assess what is the religious nationality, your age, your political power, your theoretical background, your social class, and all that stuff that you come into it, but also how it might affect what you're doing in the research. So here I give an example of when an adult researcher become aware of their own assumptions about childhood and how this may influence the research process. So the second article talks about how we come to research with certain predispositions and certain conceptualization of childhood that you already carry with you, and how you interpret their findings. You might assume that children are showing you something based on how you grew up, or it might be colored by your religious beliefs. So it's very important to be aware of how these certain factors that you're embedded in can affect some stuff, and reflexivity allows you to become aware of it and also write it down. You can actually put notes or get a diary and just like write down your reflexive process or reflexive editing of your research process, basically.